Herzlich willkommen. Welcome to our today's Coffee and Consulting to the topic tax challenges with your company car. We will, in the next 15 minutes, we will show you a bit of an overview about the certain tax challenges with company cars, and then afterwards, we are happy to answer any kind of questions you may have to that topic. My name is Friederike Ruch, and I have the honor today to discuss that topic with you. So any question or anything you would like to ask concerning that topic, please write that down in the box of questions, and then we will answer them. We'll try to answer them straight after the presentation, or in case we do need to make a bit more clarification on it, I will get back to you later. Also, on the right-hand side, you will find the slides from today. So in case you do want to download them, do that while the presentation is on. Last point, or last administrative point, today's will be recorded, so you also can listen to it then later on on YouTube, or also you will receive the recorded version on top of it. I don't know how much you have dealt with company cars in the last couple of years. I have to honestly say, each year I think about it, and we will discuss that topic. It will getting more complicated every year. So what we do in the first step, we will look at what is the Swiss requirement, or what is the Swiss way of dealing with it, and what do we need to make sure from a Swiss perspective. And then we will look at a couple of samples. We will show you how the procedure, or what you need to deal with if there are, for example, if you have a cross-border employee or weekly commuter, what you need to make sure you have discussed or clarified or looked at. So the topic about giving or providing a company car to your employees is still quite a huge benefit. Even so, I have to say, in Switzerland, still, if I see lots of companies also pay for public transportation, and that is something which is, I would say, even a more highly seen benefit as just the company car, plus the company car is in any case just for a certain group of people, and basically not for everybody. If, as an employer, I provide a company car, then there are a couple of things I need to look at from an employer perspective, and then also from a tax or social security perspective. The company car itself should actually help the employee to travel for company reasons, basically, and to visit clients or so on, and that is the main point. Now, in addition, employees usually have the possibility to use it also privately. And there are now two methods in Switzerland which we have in regards to determining what is the private usage, and then based on that, what is the applicable tax and the applicable social security. The one thing is, what I can do is I can say that the employee has to use a driver's logbook and has really to enter any ways, any drives he did with the car. And based on that, then there will be then this percentage calculated, what is the private usage part and what is the business related, company related usage. Or in case I don't want to deal with that because that is too much hassle, or the employee just don't want to deal with it, then I do have the possibility to just say, okay, we use 0.9% from the purchase price exclusive VAT, and use that basis as the percentage of the private use. With that, then everything has been dealt with in principle. What is important maybe, and what is sometimes if you discuss these kind of situations maybe with your colleagues from other countries, the calculation of that private usage is completely different in all the other countries. And what is sometimes surprises me, the basis you use for the calculation is differently used, not just the percentage, but also whether it's the purchase price exclusive VAT or the list price or the purchase price inclusive VAT, as well as what you need to add on to the purchase price. And if you calculate the purchase price, then there's everything you have to add on, like if there is a sat-nav in the car you would like to have as an additional one, then that has to be added on as well. Now, as earlier said, the private usage has not always to be calculated, and it has not to be calculated if the car is only used for business purposes or company purposes, because then there is no private usage. Or in case the employee is only allowed to use the car for commuting from the office to home, as well as for company purposes. Then you just have to tick the box F in the salary certificate. You don't need to calculate anything for the commuting, but also for the employee it is that he or she cannot deduct anything in the tax return for commuting. These are, I would say, the easiest ones, and most likely the ones you more or less have only you will only rarely see, because usually it shall be a benefit as well to the employee, and therefore they can use the car also privately. So what you will need to do is then to calculate the either based on the effective method or the lump sum of 0.9%, either or. Use that for the private usage, and then as well you would need to add on the for the commuting distance between home and work, 0.70 Swiss francs per kilometer. There is then also a deduction of it of 3,000 Swiss francs. So basically anything beyond that only will be subject to income tax as well as for Social Security. So with that, that is the Swiss part, which is, I think, quite easy, and most likely all of you know exactly what to do. Now, as you may not only just have people here in Switzerland, resident in Switzerland, and then just the Swiss perspective you need to look at. Some of your employees may live in one of the EU member states, and then you also have to look at the EU regulation. There is a huge change, or a huge change had been done in 2015, and maybe that is also when the discussion about companies' cars and providing company cars for people residing abroad maybe has stopped, or you just thought, okay, it might not be worth the hassle. And therefore, we will look now at a couple of samples in that regard as well. The major part is, or the main point is that the usage of company cars for business purposes is still good. There's no difference, no different regulation. Also, if somebody uses the car directly from home to work, no problem at all. What has changed is that any other usage on a private business is in principle not allowed. And if that will be done, then there are some income and income tax implications as well as VAT implications. Now, the thing is that the income tax on that private usage in addition, or the VAT in addition, is not that huge, but the administration behind it is so immense that as an employer, you try to avoid that as best as possible. Because if you think in the end about a situation, you have a resident in Germany, for example, he has a company car from you, and then he just doesn't want to use it for commuting back and forth from home to work. Usually maybe all his clients will be living in or are in Switzerland, so he uses the car mostly in Switzerland, but he wants maybe to go once in a while also on a weekend with the car and his children and his wife together somewhere else. And then for those travels, for these distances, you would have to report it, you have to pay income tax on it as well as VAT. And if you want to pay VAT, or if you have to pay VAT then in Germany, for example, for that, as an employer, you will need to get registered first, and that whole administration then in the end is quite immense. Therefore, you will try, or you usually try as an employer, to avoid the usage for private reasons as best as possible in those circumstances. In addition, you may have read or seen, maybe you have experienced that yourself as well in your company, that lots of people with a company car had been stopped at the border, and the custom there, the officials said, okay, if you bring in now a company car from Switzerland, because it is registered maybe in Switzerland, has a Swiss number plate. If you enter now with that company car to Germany where you are living, then it's kind of importing a Swiss car to Germany, and therefore there should be import tax on it. Now, if you look at now a cross-border employee who actually is doing that every day, that doesn't make any sense at all. Plus, it's not really, it is importing a car, but it's just the usage of the car. And therefore, the EU regulation has seen that that is an issue. And it's not an issue just between Switzerland and any other EU member states, but it's also between the other EU member states in between. And therefore they said, okay, if now you have someone, an employee who actually is using the car for traveling back home, then we need to have that in a kind of a contract agreement. And therefore the recommendation is that you will put in, either you make an addendum to your employment contract and add there that for the commuting between home and work, the employee is allowed for that to use the company car, but there's no other private usage allowed. There had been a couple of situations which had been made aware in the media as well, where someone had actually used the company car and did not go directly from his workplace back to his home, to his residence, but made a bit of a used a different road because he wanted to go and make some grocery shopping before he went home, which had been the road was about 2 to 3 kilometers more than the one he usually used. And that is basically not prohibited. So he actually had used the car for a private usage because he went grocery shopping to a different place, not on his road back home, and therefore, because it is prohibited, there was a fine then imposed on it. What is possible is if on the travel route back to his home, if there is, for example, a shop where he can do this grocery shopping and he just is stopping and going there, no problem at all. But as long as you use a different road, then there's an issue with that is not allowed and could be fined accordingly. In addition, there is because the EU wants to protect their cars and their products. They say there's in principle a 10% duty for a company car in case the car is not produced in the EU. So in case the car is produced, for example, in the US or anywhere else, then you will have to pay in addition those 10%. Unless you do a certain registration for free traffic, and then you can avoid that. As well as what you can avoid is that import tax. We just have indicated now there the import tax for Germany, France, Italy. So you see, it's not just a small amount, it is then quite significantly. What also, and that cannot be kind of avoided, is the VAT on private usage in case it is more than just going back home. Let's see the regulation, which is can be quite complicated on 3 different samples. The first sample is a Swiss employer, work location in Switzerland, the residence is in Germany, and they use a company car which is registered in Switzerland, so it is with the Swiss employer. The employee, he is a cross-border commuter. He uses the car for the daily commuting between the work location in Switzerland and his residency. He can use the car privately and for business or company purposes. So from a Swiss perspective, it's quite simple. We do have to use the purchase price and then calculate the private usage. And based on that, the employee will pay Swiss Social Security contribution, as well as now tax at source of 4.5%. And that is because he is living in Germany. If we say he's commuting on a daily basis, we would say he's a real cross-border commuter from a tax point of view, and therefore the 4.5% are applicable. Now, that is the Swiss side. Now, if we look at the German side, there's then also a couple of things to look at. And one is because he's using it for the direct commuting from home to work, we need to see how the private usage will be now dealt with in Germany. In Germany, we can request, or actually at the border, we can request the registration for free traffic for legal usage. That means he can only use the car then for really going from the work location back home. And if we do make that registration, which is usually then valid for 2 years and can then be extended, then there is no VAT and no duty on it. What will still be the situation, he still will have to pay income tax on it, but that is based on the situation of being a cross-border commuter and having then to pay based on the German rules. Now the calculation will be made, and that calculation is a bit different, because there it is that you pay as well for the distance between home and work an additional amount, and then as well you will have the private usage, the percentage on top of it based on German regulation. So in his situation in Switzerland, on the Swiss benefit of the private usage, you pay those 4.5% in the Swiss Social Security, and in Germany he will pay now on the private usage or the private usage benefit calculated from a German tax point of view. He will pay the income tax in Germany on top of it. VAT is also applicable for the traveling, because it is seen as the employer is renting out a car, and it's a service that the employee can use the car, and therefore VAT is also required on it. But that is just an administrative point to take care of. Let us go to the second sample, where we now have a weekly commuter. That is basically someone who will have the residence in Germany as well as in Switzerland in our sample. So it is still, there is a Swiss employer, work location is in Switzerland, and the individual has his residency in Germany, main residence, as well as in Switzerland, because he is working from Monday to Friday in Switzerland and therefore living in Switzerland. He's commuting once per week back home, but otherwise here in Switzerland. The employee now uses his own car, and the car is registered in Germany, and he uses the car in Switzerland as well as in Germany, which is not that unusual. What needs now to be done? It is basically he needs in Switzerland to report the car. There's a custom permit for it, so he can use the car, drive with the car for 2 years, and that can be also then extended. In Germany, he has not to do anything at all, and if he now uses the car for business purposes, he will just have to get paid for the effective kilometer. Usually we have seen in companies something between 70 Rappen up to 1 Swiss franc, depending a bit on whether someone otherwise has the possibility also to have a fuel card, so they can just go and get gas wherever for free or based on the employer is paying for it. So there are different amounts per kilometer which will be paid, but that is something which is a Swiss specific, or has only to be viewed from a Swiss point of view and has not to be viewed from a German point of view, because that employee who is working Monday to Friday here in Switzerland is completely subject to Swiss income tax as well as Swiss social security contribution. So the only thing you need to look at is really the Swiss way or the Swiss point of view, and not the German one. And as a last sample with the service car, and there are also always some discussions about it. What happens if an employee has to go now somewhere outside of Switzerland with a service car with the full equipment, what happened actually there. Now, in that sample, we have a Swiss employer, work location again is Switzerland, residency, we say, of the employee is now Austria. He has received from his employer a service car, inclusive all the equipment he needs, because if he goes then, as for example, as a technician, goes to all the different clients and then has to repair or maintain whatever, he needs to have the specific equipment in it. So if we say the car is registered in Switzerland, he uses it in Switzerland, Austria, and Germany, wherever. What needs to be done there? So the first thing is in the employment contract, or as said, as an addendum to the employment contract, there needs to be written when, why, and for what he can use the car. That is the most important one, because that is really something which the usually when you cross the border, they will really look at the border, and the officials want to see that. Otherwise, we have the same topic here, that if you crosses the border, then otherwise they say, okay, that is importing of a car. In Switzerland, I mean, it's a service car. We are not talking now about the private usage, but there's still a couple of things to be done, because he uses a Swiss car outside of Switzerland for business purposes. So there is no adding of any kind of private usage. There's also no VAT implied in Switzerland, but what needs to be done to avoid any customs, that custom document Carnet ATA, which needs to be filled out and stamped from the authority, and that is usually valid for 1 year and can be extended. In Austria, there's as well no VAT as long as the necessary declarations will be made in Austria, so to avoid any kind of VAT or import tax or any kind of duty applicable to it. What you need to take away with that on that sample is that you really, here we have listed down what the regulation is with Austria, but each country or each EU member state has its different regulations and matters to how they want to deal with that. What you need to do is you need to clarify for each other member state every time the situation, as well as here, we've listed down what the regulation is in Germany and Austria. But what we've seen since that EU audience had been implemented in 2015, there had also been since then a couple of changes to it. So if you only irregularly deal with that, then just really clarify it each time to make sure you have everything in place, because it's then, if once the employees then stopped at the border and they have then to pay right there usually already the import tax or duty. So it's better to have that clarified before. The recommendation from our side is definitely make the adjustment of the employment contract in which the private usage is indicated, or make an addendum, and then not the whole employment contract has to be taken always with them. They just can take the addendum with them. And that is definitely something. Ask or tell your employees they should use or should take always that document with them whenever they cross the border, in order that they can show that everything has been dealt with. Also, in case you do have a company car policy, then make the necessary adjustments based on the EU regulation so that you make sure you have you're in line with everything. We've seen a case from a client where and there it was the French authority asked for the company car policy because the addendum to the employment contract which they have done was referring then in the end to the company car policy. And therefore, in the end, the authority wanted to see the company car policy on top of it. And as just said before, make the necessary clarification on VAT and custom duties for each country. And as said, if you have only irregularly people taking a company car abroad, then make each time anew the clarification. Otherwise, it's good if you just do maybe a checkup every year to see that everything is still in line. And lots of it is really just a matter of doing the right formalities in order to avoid any huge amounts to be paid. So that is as far our presentation or our input on company cars. Now it would be time for your questions. And I will see what kind of questions we already received. There's already one question. What happens when on your way home there is an accident and you need to take a totally different road to go home? In case that's the situation, then that is an exception if there's really an accident or there's a construction underway and it shows you or there's the sign or there are the signs then that you have to use a different road, then that is viewed as an exception and you can use that different road to travel home without a problem. So there is no problem in that regard. Otherwise, absolutely true, it would be viewed or seen as private usage. And as I explained earlier, you're only allowed to use the company car really directly from home to work and not with a kind of different way. So in case you say, oh, I would like to bring my children to the kindergarten or school on the way, but there is then, even if it's just a kilometer, 2 kilometers difference to the road you usually take, that is seen as real private usage, which is prohibited in the EU. And there's a question about what happens if we don't have the company's cars are not registered with us, but we do have leasing arrangements and we have everything dealt by the leasing company. That is for employers usually the easier way, I would say, as you don't have to look at all the regulations in regard to whether there is now VAT to be declared or whatever. You just have that the leasing fee and which you pay, and that's it. What is there important is still that make an addendum to your to the employment contract and indicate, if it's not already indicated, that the employee can also use the car for private usage. And there's the next question. We do have a cross-border employee. He is living in Switzerland, but working partially in Germany in our German entity, and he has a company car here from the Swiss entity, but he uses it also for his position he has in Germany. I have to say that is quite complicated, because if the individual has two different positions, one position in Switzerland and one position in Germany, then you will have to look at that from a Swiss perspective as well as from a German perspective. If there would be not that second employment in Germany, then it would be just if someone from the Swiss company is just visiting the German legal entity, then it's a company purpose. Then in case you go and do that visit, just make sure you have something with you when taking the car to Germany that is allowed. You're allowed to do that. And it is really only for company purposes. So you can show that you're allowed to do that, and what the reason is for. But if you have two employments, then you need to determine whether that is now kind of private drive, and then it would be not allowed because it's not between work and home, or whether that is still company or company road, company drive between the Swiss entity and the German entity, even there are two different employments. I think if you do want to have more clarification on that issue, then just let me know, and we definitely will be happy to look at, but that we need to look in more details. So if you have any other question, then just let me know. Apparently not. Apparently everything is clear. That is perfect. So even if you now afterwards you think about it, or think about your the situation in your company, and you have the one or the other question, then just get back to us, and we're happy to support you. Then I just use the next 2 minutes before we close this session. Our next seminar is on the 14th September, still online. It's about business travelers in Switzerland and the different tax, social security, and immigration aspects. And then our next webinar will be on the 29th of June about payroll solutions for expatriates, which will be held in German. I hope you enjoyed our Coffee and Consulting, and it was helpful and clarified the one or the other question you may had before joining it. I will close the today session, and wish you a great week, and looking forward to see you and meet you at one of our next sessions. Thank you for your attention.